that with every passing year seems more preordained. Men are grass, he thinks. He stands very still at the window and lets his mind wander over the hills until, in a little while, he begins to merge with the night and the land. The aches and sorrows of his 60-year-old body fall away, and he ceases to be aware of himself as he is. The earth, this particular earth beneath the snow, holds the memory of him as he was. The eyes of his mind see another night, another season, another valley. Chapter 2. June, 1943. The two-story white frame house shone pale blue in the moonlight. There were no lights on, not because of any wartime blackout or other of Roosevelt's conservation plans, but because it was an Amish house and it had never coveted electric lights. It was a big, square, solid farmhouse, gut gemacht, a stark fortress between the road and the farm, between the world and the earth. Upstairs, the 6 boys slept in a large corner bedroom. Mose, the eldest, in his own single bed, Will and Tobe stacked in bunks, and the 3 youngest together in a double bed. Across the hall, 3 girls shared roughly the same arrangement. Clara, Will's older sister, had married and left home back in the spring. The other 9 children remained. Opposite the stairwell on the other end of the house slept the parents, Levi, the patriarch, and Elizabeth, his second wife. Will, the next to the eldest son, lay staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the night. Since midnight, the rhythmic buzzing of insects had quieted as the window-shaped rectangle of moonlight had inched its way along the heart pine floor to the middle of the room. Mose breathed evenly and deeply, immersed in the sleep of the just, exhausted from a long day of cutting hay. The low rumble of their father's snore swelled and ebbed all the way from the other end of the house, a snore that had held steady for the last hour. It was time. Will slithered out of the top bunk and down to the floor, carefully, so as not to make the faintest whisper of sound, but it did no good. Tobe had been waiting. He flung back the covers, swung his legs over from the bottom bunk, fully dressed, and wiggled his feet into his boots. Always the hasty one, Tobe finished tying his laces first and rose, starting for the door. Will snagged his suspenders to stop him, then shook his head, pointing at the window. Tobe went first, out the window and across the tin roof of the summer kitchen, dropping his hat to the ground, grabbing onto the limb of the walnut tree, and swinging out. The limb bowed under Tobe's weight, but it would hold. It had held before. His legs flailed for a second, then clamped on the limb, and he monkeyed down. Will followed, and moments later the 2 boys picked up their wide-brimmed hats from where they had dropped them among the gladiolas. Will paused there, reaching down to run his fingertips up the length of a thick leaf. Elizabeth Mullet took pride in her flowers. Her beds of tulips and roses and lilies were the envy of even the Amish women. Her kitchen garden in the flat just below the house was ringed about with a thick bank of marigolds, which she claimed kept insects away, and sprinkled with mothballs she claimed kept out the rabbits, though rabbits had been scarce for the last 2 years, thanks to Tobe and his 410. It was the one thing he did well. The moonlight was bright enough so that Will could make out the shapes of the potato plants, overlarge this year, and he wondered, briefly, how the potatoes would fare after the wet spring, whether it would be a bumper crop or if the growth had all gone to the plants and the potatoes themselves would be full of rot. The green beans were almost ready, even if Will wouldn't be around to eat them. He snugged his hat on his head and moved on. Limping slightly, favoring a sore knee as they neared the woodshed, Tobe said softly, "I don't know why we wouldn't just come down the stairs." "Well, little brother, do you know which step creaks?" Is it the third or the fourth?" "It's the third one, I'm sure." "It's the fifth," Will said, glancing back at the house. "And his bed is just on the other side of the wall. You would awaken the bear, and then what would become of me?" He flinched involuntarily as the thought flashed across his mind and left its thumbprint as a bright light seen for a moment leaves a print upon the eye. What was a man that one loose tread could alter the course of his life? Tobe sighed and said nothing, his customary response to the constant criticism he endured from his brothers and his father. He was flighty, and Will would not have let him come if he'd had any choice. On this night, choice itself seemed a thing of the past, a childhood memory. Tobe had caught him hiding his bundle in the woodpile yesterday, and instantly guessed his plans. So now Tobe would come with him. Burrowing into the pile, Will's sure hands tossed aside sticks of firewood until he reached the burlap bag. Drawing it out, he flipped the bundle over his shoulder and set off at a trot, making for the wooded ridge silhouetted in the distance. Near the barn, the air still held the cloying scent of butchered chickens, for his sisters had cleaned out the chicken house early in the week. One of the big Belgian draft horses, Will's favorite, the one who liked rutabagas, snuffled in his stall, saying goodbye, as the boys glided past the barn door. He paid little attention to where he stepped as he crossed the strawberry patch. The strawberries were nearly finished now anyway, though he avoided the raspberries entirely, since they were just getting ripe. Running on the even ground between the windrows, he heard Tobe's steps falling behind, felt the crunch of stubble underfoot, and smelled fresh-cut hay on the night breeze. He flexed his broad shoulders against the slight soreness left by the hay fork, a good soreness, the residue of strength and youth. Will knew he would be badly missed in the fields this coming week, the last week of June. After 3 days of sunshine, the anxious farmers would be rushing to get hay in before the next rains came. These would be the longest days of the year. Levi Mullet and his sons would fill every minute with work from well before daylight until pitch dark. Will's hands and back and legs were strong, this he knew. If he could have chosen, he would have left in the winter-time. Leaving now, with so much work to do, drove yet another nail through his heart. Skirting the upper cornfield, nearing the woods, he dodged around the depression left by the stump he and Mose dug up last winter where lightning had killed the old oak tree. Will's feet knew where it was, even in the dark, but he heard the oof behind him as Tobe plowed straight into it and went down face first in the damp grass. Will stopped at the edge of the woods, where the land began to slope upward, and waited. Limping even worse after tripping over the stump hole, Tobe finally caught up to him, laughing that peculiar little snorting derisive laugh of his, the impish laugh of a 16-year-old boy. "Brother, we'd better be a long ways gone before morning," he said, doffing his wide straw hat and dragging a sleeve over his brow in a single practiced motion. "I wish I could see the old man's face when he finds out." Tobe saw the whole thing as an adventure, a lark. For all his faults, he was a sweet boy, full of light and laughter. He kept no record of grievances, and he had not lived long enough nor fallen hard enough to understand that other people do. He thought no more of running off to the world with Will than he would think of hitching a horse to the hack and driving to the store for a bag of salt. Even now, the punishment Levi would heap upon him at his returning would last only a little while, and then life would be good again. Tobe didn't allow people to expect too much from him, and so they were never deeply disappointed. Will, however, stood at the edge of an abyss. Looking back across the moonlit fields at the only home he had ever known, it was a watershed moment in his life, and he knew it. If he left now, he could never return. If he stayed, he could never leave. Beyond this ridge lay the world, with all its wonder and terror and mystery, though for Will the mystery was not so